Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Leanear Randall. We're going to be discussing his amazing novel, Just Deliver the Message. Now, it's available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. And people, you're going to want to check back in frequently because that's the only book that's available for Leanear at the moment. But there are two other books on the horizon, one of which is a sequel to Just Deliver the Message. And the title for that one is You Know My Number, You Know My Name. So I'm telling you, check back in frequently. And by the time we've finished discussing the book today, you're going to understand why you're going to want to do just that. And before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out that Leanear was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by one of the best advertising firms in the business. And people, you already know who I'm talking about, of course. It's Author Reputation Press. So listen to me. If you're a writer out there, you've written a book, and now you find yourself at a crossroads because, well, you need help moving the book you just finished writing. Well, I'm going to give you some fantastic advice. Contact ARP. They're one of the best in the business to do it. And this is what they specialize in. So head on over to authorreputationpress.com today. Gather all of the ways that their fantastic team is going to help customize your creative endeavors. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Leanear here on the line. It's his book. He's written it. He's done the research, and he's going to be able to articulate it much better than I ever could. So sit back and make sure you're strapped in because this is going to be a wonderful ride. Leanear, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today, sir?
Oh, I'm doing fine, sir. I'm just here waiting to complete this interview. But I'm doing fine. Glad you invited me.
Absolutely. Listen, you started it, Leanear, okay? You had to write this fantastic book for us to invite you on the network. So thank you for doing just that. And thank you even more for being here to discuss it. Before we go into the book, though, because I know we have a lot of information to discuss pertaining to the journey that we're getting ready to embark upon. But start off by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself, please.
Yes, sir. I started life as a family member of a military veteran. I actually went to 7 schools in 13 years, and this is the plight of dependent children affiliated with the government, the military in particular. From there, I went to Germany in the 2nd grade and received an excellent education there. But once I returned to the States, and at the time that I returned, the schools weren't fully integrated. So what I learned to do was dummy down to the students I was with because initially they had issues with me because I had a quest for knowledge, and it caused them some concern. However, I went on to another state, another school, and then back to Germany, where I eventually graduated. In Germany, I began my writing. I'd write poems for people. I'd write small narratives for people. I was on the school newspaper. And my senior class was only 31 people, and I think I was the bottom of the class. But however, I joined the Army and met a lot of interesting people. At the time, the Vietnam War was going on, and there were a lot of people with degrees. And for some reason, they took me aside and got me into reading, and I nearly read everything. And from different authors, different topics, and it was one after the other. I kind of developed from reading James Baldwin. You must trust your own experience. It was a article he had written for his nephew, From there, I obtained my degree, Langston University in Oklahoma. I attended Purdue and the University of Pittsburgh. Then after being unable to live in the civilian world, which was really complicated for me, I returned to the military. I ended up teaching chemistry for 6 years before I joined the Criminal Investigation Command. And there I became a criminal investigator agent, and I did a lot of bodyguard work for the government. It took me to many countries, and I worked with many dignitaries in the country, including Colin Powell, Dick Cheney, Robert Taft, just a number of different people. But I got to travel the Middle East and Africa a lot, and Europe. It was like returning home when I went to Europe. And then following that, I did background investigations after I retired from the Army. I gave them another 15 years, and then I totally retired. I'd always wanted to write, and I was just trying to convince myself to start. And eventually, after developing a system of categorizing people, I decided to write this book.
People, could we have selected a more perfect embodiment of a person of distinction to be on our network? My goodness. Leanear, your background is so eclectic and wonderfully impressive. Listen, man, we're going to have to invite you back on the network, not to discuss this book again, not to discuss the sequel or the other book that's being created, but just to talk about your background, because wow, I'm sure you have stories for days, man, and we would love to hear it. Thank you very much for sharing all of that, Leanear. Of course, the common saying, thank you very much for your service. I will point out that it never feels good enough when I say that. I mean, for the sacrifices that you and all of your military brothers and sisters have made protecting our liberties and freedoms here in the States, a thank you just doesn't seem like it does quite enough. Unfortunately, that's all I have to offer at the moment, Leanear. So thank you very much for your service. And without further ado, man, let's jump right in. The Anchor is all about your fantastic novel, Just Deliver the Message. So Leanear, just tell us about the book. Tell us about the journey we're getting ready to embark upon with it.
When I wrote this book, I was thinking to myself, I know all of these people, so I just needed to put them in a sequence so that the stories would be coherent. So what I did was I altered the names of the people I knew. Some people I used from the Bible, and I developed kind of like a religious, spiritual novel. In the novel, there's the straight story that you read, but underneath the story, it's kind of like an allegory. I had a meaning. I wanted to, show the different characteristics of people and how they intermingled or interrelated. And that's what I actually did on this particular book. If when you read it, you'll see that these characters are actually someone I actually knew at some time or the other.
Leanear, we know about the background and your love for reading and also the passion for writing. But when it comes to this particular narrative, as you mentioned, these are people that you knew, right? Of course, information has been changed to protect identities and so on and so forth. But what inspired you to write this particular novel?
What I wanted to do was write a book that as I said before, that anyone could read. And what inspired me to do this were those people that I knew. And there were good people, there were bad people, if you can categorize good and bad. But I was able to use their characters and their actions and motivations to develop this. I used history, I used writers, and I wanted to expose, that sort of thing to the media. I mean, to people, the readers. So I just developed the characters and tried to give it a religious overtone because I used the Bible to validate a lot of the occurrences there in the book. Mm-hmm. And with that, I was able to, and you know, history and society and places and people, I was able to put this together, and I thought in a coherent manner. So, you know, I was happy with the product, and I was really happy because this is my first attempt at writing a book. You know, I've written poems for my wife for over 30 years, but I'm certain those are not good, but she likes them.
Don't sell yourself short there, Leanear. I'm sure they are fantastic. Wife knows best, man. You know, she knows best. People, again, you're going to want to head on over to Amazon and Barnes & Noble to get lost in this fantastic journey. The title is called Just Deliver the Message by Leanear Randall. You want to get this book added to your shelf. I promise you that. Leanear, curiosity for myself with this next one, but what would you say was a highlight for you in writing the book? Or if not a highlight, something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating before you began?
I actually thought I would never get it published. And then the thought process, you know, creating these different scenarios and how some flowed, and it took me months sometimes to come up with the next sequence, but I enjoyed it all. I have PTSD really bad, so it was kind of difficult to stay focused, but I was able to do that, and my wife kind of helped me out a lot. She made sure I stayed on task.
Leanear, question here with this next one, and my artists, of course, can relate, but specifically we're going to gear it towards writing. But how do you handle the vulnerability that comes with creating your work, but then sharing it with the world? Because you know that once you do that, you're leaving yourself susceptible to criticism. And there is a precarious situation that you put yourself in. And as I mentioned, all artists can relate. But let's focus in here on the writing since you're a writer. How do you handle the vulnerability that comes with sharing your work?
I tell a truth, and I think it's my truth, that you don't have to believe what I put down. I just want to expose people to ideas. Yeah. You know, we oftentimes get caged into a funnel, and we can't deviate, you know, left or right, because this is what people expect you to do. It's similar to voting exclusively Democrat or exclusively Republican on people, where, you know, you could have good people or you could have bad, people you like and programs you like and those that you oppose. But I think that crosses, you know, boundaries. And this book I wrote, I tried to, disclose that.
Mm-hmm. We're going to dive down the rabbit hole a little here with this next one. If you could enter the world of the book that you've written, Leanear, which page would you land on and why?
That's a tough one. I think the conclusion, where not the conclusion itself, but the chapter before it concludes, where all the individuals, they fulfill their journey, the bad theirs, the good theirs, you know, that sort of thing. So I would go to the chapter before the last. And that way, you know, the characters that were evolved in the book, some are still there and some aren't.
Right. Two-part question here with this next one as we close out, because I do want to give you a quick opportunity to go into a brief description of the sequel. Who would you say is your intended reader with the book? I know it's open and it's available for everyone of all ages, but who would you say is your intended reader with the book? And then what are some of the main messages or themes that you hope that they receive upon completing it?
Let me answer that in two parts. I was in Africa just journeying to Goree Island on one of the missions. I think it was a mission with General Powell. And a young lady came up to me and she said, do you know Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior? I was talking to myself saying, I'm going to turn you in for proselytizing. But I didn't. And she really became, a relatively good friend of mine, although she was assigned somewhere else. But she kind of planted a foundation for me. And when I returned to Nuremberg, to Germany, where I was assigned, it was like 5 consecutive days of people asking me to go to church on that Sunday. So, I avoid things that are mystical. So I said, well, if someone comes up to me on Friday and asks me to do that, I'm going to church. And actually, these people I didn't know, because I didn't know a lot of the people there, a lot of the soldiers or even the civilians, because I was a criminal investigator and I only dealt with the majority of criminals. So with that urging, I actually started a church, and I was maybe 40 at the time, and eventually accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I think I was baptized on my birthday that year. But the second part, the book was written kind of, after the horsemen had departed. The characters are all new, except with the exception of a few people. The main character, he's there, and a couple of the side characters that I had, the lesser characters. But I wanted people to, some people say they're religious. Some people say that they're spiritual, but I kind of go by what I read in John, the book of John, where Jesus said, the time is coming when you should worship people in spirit and in truth. So I think that inner truth or spirit that you develop, that it'll bring a sort of tranquility to your life. I know at the time, when I really began to establish this or write this second book, I thought of the times when I thought to myself, who cares? I mean, who cares about you? And no one. And I would contemplate, I don't like to say this, but committing suicide. Wow. But someone would always come to me and say, in my mind, in my spirit, that's foolish. Listen to me, and I'll get you through this. And there was a person in the first book that didn't heed that message, and it has a bearing on the other people in the book.
People, I'm telling you, this is inspirational stuff. This book is so much bigger than a fictional creation. That it is. Entertainment, of course, but learn from his story, from his background, from his journey. This is something that you need to have on your shelf. Listen, I know we said that we were going to go into the other book. He's already started to touch up on it. I'm going to close it out here because this is something, if you're not convinced, you're asleep, okay? You need to wake up because you're going to get passed by. I'm going to say it for you once again. Amazon and Barnes & Noble are where you have to go. We just finished talking to the magnificent Leanear Randall about his wonderful novel, Just Deliver the Message. Be on the lookout for the sequel as well as another book. There's going to be 3 in totality very, very shortly. So check back into Amazon and Barnes & Noble frequently to pick those up the moment that they become available. A wonderful book to add to your shelf, an even better gift to add to someone else's. So you know where to go. Leanear, this has been an absolute pleasure, man. Such an honor. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you, sir. You're probably one of the best professionals I've heard on the radio. I appreciate it.